Hi everyone. So we're going to continue on our journey to learn more about R. In this module, you'll be able to write your own function from beginning to end. And we're then also going to be able to put new elements into our functions like loops and control statements like if-else that will allow you to control the flow of your code. Then we're also going to spend some time learning about the apply function family that allows you to execute your code and let them run in parallel, and it's a very efficient way of executing R. And finally, we're also going to learn a little bit about plots and create some basic plots. And then finally, there's also a few things that we can do to search for patterns in your string to find out the names and words that you're looking for. So why would you want to write your own function? Well, for many cases, you might have this really complex code that you're putting together, and instead of having them write it line by line, you can give them a function that they can just call the name and provide all the arguments you need. And the reason why you might have this is because maybe you've come up with a really clever way of analyzing the data, and you want to make it more accessible to your peers and colleagues. You can also be a simple way of automating your workflow. Maybe there's a natural steps that you always execute when you're doing your analysis. Instead of running it one at a time, you can write a script or a function that will essentially execute it one at a time, again, providing with the arguments that it needs. And then another benefit of this is that ultimately we'll be able to use the apply function and apply that one function that you've created to, let's say, every rows, every columns, or maybe even to every elements that are grouped by some sort of factor. So let's first talk about what this function looks like. There are three main parts to a function. One is obviously the name. This is recommended that you come up with a name that's very explanatory of what the role or purpose of the function is. Giving it one letter names is not great because it just doesn't explain or remind anyone of what it's supposed to do. The more definitive or descriptive you can be, the better. Also, stay clear of functions or names that are already being used by other packages. So you can try to make it as unique as possible so there's less chances of it being interacting or conflicting with other packages. Arguments. So once you have the name of the function, you want to tell the person who's using your function what are the arguments that you need to process. So for example, if you're going to normalize a data set, maybe your argument will be that data set. If you're going to perform an arithmetic operation, maybe it's a number that you're accepting or a name that you want to manipulate. Finally, then you'll have the expression. That's the actual code that you're going to be running, all the things that you'll be doing. And it's a really good idea at that point to use a return function to actually return the results back to the person who called the function. So generally the rule is that if you don't have a return command, R will essentially return back the last successful operation. So the last statement in your expression, the result of that will get sent back automatically. But just for good coding habits, you should always have a return function so you know exactly what you're sending back. All right, so this is kind of what it looks like. So in this case, the name is actually the name of the function here. And then this function is the name of the function you need to create the function. It's a tongue twister, but you need this function. And these are a list of arguments. So in this case, I've just called them argument 1, 2, and so on, but these could be whatever names you want it to be. And this is all your code. Everything that you're typing in, all the processing, anything you need to do. And at the end, you have your return my results. And then this is what will go back. So if someone runs your code and saves the output into a variable, this is what's going to get saved in the variable. Another thing I want you to note is that these curly brackets are being used to define the start and end of the function. So anything between these curly brackets is a block that will be used as the operations of your function. Okay, so let me give you a really simple example. So in this case, we're going to create a function, but the important thing is that when you write the function in your screen in the R terminal, you have to execute that for it to be put into the workspace, right, in the environment. Once it's in the environment, then you can actually use the function by just simply calling its name. If you make any changes to the function, you have to re-execute those lines. And to call the function, just simply use its name and give the function. So here's the example. I made a really simple function called square me. So obviously by the name, you know that if you provide any kind of argument, it's going to perform the square operation, right? So it's just going to take the value, square it, and it will return that squared value back to the user. Okay? So these are the curly brackets that define the beginning and end of the function. This is my argument. So whenever I call my function using the name of my function and I provided my first argument 3, this value 3 will be assigned to x. So now in this entire block between these curly brackets, the x is going to contain the value 3. And so the first thing will be 3 will be squared. So you'll have a 9 and it will return the value 9 back. Okay? So go ahead and take some time and try to see what would happen if you typed in other commands inside the square me function to see what it would return.